All right. We're right in summertime now and so I'm going to be probably taking some time away from the channel a little bit, or at least not focusing on it so much for a while I spend this time with my family. But just wanted to at least put this out there for the time being. I like to try and read the entire Bible as much as I can, like go from start to finish. And I've started it again. And when I do that, I like to go to this what was it called? Blue something. Blue Letter Bible Chronological Plan. And that way, the way it's broken up, we have these different books and sometimes they're kind of put in different categories, but they're not necessarily in strict chronological order. And that way, I like going through and marking off where I am, and that way, that's just my favorite way to go through. And I just finished Genesis, one of my very favorites, and I just want to share something also in light of maybe some of what's going on, and I want to be very careful about how I say it because I don't want it to sound like any sort of attack, um, or anything like that. Uh, but one of my favorite things in the Bible is right away in Genesis, and one of the themes that I like to see when I start. As you go through, certainly there are lots of things that we can take out of Genesis, and with the creation, and Abraham is heavily featured, and Isaac and Joseph, and all these great stories. But one of the great stories, or the themes, is about brothers in Genesis, and how right away after Adam and Eve leave the garden, we have this traumatic, terrible incident between brothers where one rises up against the other. And I can't think of a worse thing to happen with this first family. And it seems like it's a story where the first one gets resentful and kind of jealous, or whatever the case, against the second one, meaning Cain and Abel, rises up and kills his brother. And we go on, and we have Shem, and we have Ham, and we have those brothers. Da 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 da. We get to Isaac and Ishmael, and if you're familiar with that story, it's the same sort of thing where the first, who comes from Hagar, this Egyptian, and then feels kind of unwanted, or not like the chosen one, I guess you could say. And it becomes sort of like that. And then we continue on. We get to Isaac's two sons, Esau being the first, and Jacob right behind, holding his heel. And for a lot of reasons, Jacob is a little bit of a stinker. But he sells, or Esau sells his birthright to Jacob for a bit of pottage, because he's been working all day out in the field and feels like he's maybe going to die, and so he better do that. And because of that, loses his birthright. Their mother favors Jacob, the younger one, and it becomes this major sort of clash. And unless you actually read through the Bible, you don't really get. A lot of us don't really think about the resolution of some of that, where Jacob goes away for a long time and comes back and thinks Esau is just going to kill him, and it doesn't end up being the case. But it's this great resolution with brothers. So there's a third story with brothers for sure that gets featured. But each of them have this butting head sort of thing between the older brother and the younger brother. And then we get to Joseph, who's the youngest. And we have, even though Joseph is the youngest of the family, they all come from different mothers under Joseph or under Jacob. And Joseph and Benjamin come from the one mother at the very end there. And because Joseph is getting this extra treatment or whatever the case, these privileges with this coat of many colors or coat of many markings or fancy coat or whatever the Hebrew would say that is, I think it was Judah's idea, or Simeon. Judah, I might be getting that wrong. And I just read it again. But they decide to toss him in a pit. And then when they feel they can get some money out of it, I think that's when Judah decides or has the idea that they should sell him off. And then he goes to Egypt, and it's this terrible thing. And there's this reunion of brothers as we go on, and when they think that Joseph is going to harbor all this stuff, he doesn't, and another kind of coming together of brothers where it really started really terribly. And I love that story. If you actually read through it, it's one of my favorite in the Bible. But again, it's this story of brothers who really, really are bashing heads and then come together. And then we have Ephraim and Manasseh. And for all intents and purposes, it's a little bit different than the other brothers. It doesn't quite show as much in the Bible, but as far as Jewish tradition and as far as I've been able to listen to some rabbis speak of this, they were a little bit different. It was like the first instance of brothers being mentioned where they didn't have this situation from the beginning, but they were much more unified. And I don't know if this is throughout all Jewish traditions. I'm not an expert on that, but I have heard some speak on this, that they will give their sons and daughters blessings, and to the daughters they will bless the daughters to be like the patriarchs' wives, those initial, like Rebecca and Sarah and whatnot, to be like them. And you would think, okay, well, so for the males, they should be like Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, bless them to be like Adam. But no, they bless them that they may be like Ephraim and Manasseh, which that always surprised me and always kind of got my attention. But I thought, how interesting. And it's because of the fact that they didn't have this, at least those initial two, these two that were culturally Egyptian, that got adopted in. And even when Ephraim, being the younger of the two, Joseph brought Ephraim and Manasseh to their father Jacob to get a blessing, and Joseph had Ephraim in his left hand, or at his right hand, and Manasseh at his left, so that when he brought him forward, Jacob would be able to bless Manasseh with his right hand and give like the primary, whatever, not the birthright blessing, but the blessing of the older, right? Kind of like a birthright blessing. And then Ephraim would get the other one, but he switched it. And in any of these other cases, such as Isaac and Ishmael or Jacob and Esau, that would have been like a major, major terrible incident, or potentially. Think of Cain and Abel. But it wasn't so. Manasseh, as far as the traditions, didn't question that, and I don't think Ephraim was jockeying for that, but it was what it was. And a part of it is maybe because I guess Ephraim was blessed to be fruitful. I mean, their symbol is grapes, and they kind of would represent the upper tribes when there's this split. Like the upper tribes, even though there are a lot of tribes, they would become so fruitful that you'd kind of call northern Israel, it almost would go by Ephraim as well. And split, taken away by the Assyrians, and then would kind of be found elsewhere in the world. But those initial two, I've always liked that Genesis, for the many things that it has, does feature in its conclusion, sort of, these two brothers that don't fall down the same pitfalls as the ones who had come before it, and many who came after it. And so I hope we can be more like them. Now, one of the reasons also why I love David, even though he kind of went down a rough road, he was kicked out of the city and became sort of the champion of the disenfranchised. I mean, David from the Bible. And kind of that's who kind of he got his army, and who, he got all these followers. He was culturally very popular and becoming popular, but first it was amongst the people that wouldn't have been allowed in the city. And think of the story of Jesus healing the leper, and what a gesture it was for him to approach the leper when he could have been kicked out as well, and to offer that to him, and to be that symbol, or to be that shepherd for him and for others. And I think as I watch the general conferences and things, a lot of it is about being peacemakers and to be like a shepherd. I know with some of the political stuff that has gone on, certainly in the last 10 years, we feel that we must be like lions, and there's certainly a time for that. There are certainly things to defend against. But just because we are raising our voices doesn't necessarily mean that we are being lions. Sometimes we are just raising our stick that has fallen into our hands and are seeing, it's like the hammer and the nail. When you have a hammer, every solution looks like it needs a hammer. And certainly there are times for a hammer. But I am looking for shepherds. And I am waiting for the shepherd. And a lot of people are still waiting for that shepherd, be it they're waiting for a peacemaker or whatever they're calling. A lot of these different traditions are waiting for this shepherd to come, and certainly, wielding a sword and this, but also wielding a staff to help his people, whoever they are. And I worry when people, in their zeal trying to be lions, are hurting the flock, or as they try to protect their flock, will go and they'll view maybe something that has been done by some from another flock, or some of the ancestors of another flock, and they feel that it is necessary to go and attack another flock. And, I think we need to be careful about that sort of dialogue, especially if we're just casting it on everyone and being reactionary. I think people want to be lions, but sometimes it's just immaturity when you just throw everything you're feeling and all this anger. That is not being a peacemaker. It's just not. And sometimes it's just being immature. Especially when you're just trying to like there's terrible things that have happened with a number of different peoples, but if we go out and attack everyone in that group, it does no good. And it feels like throwing out the baby with the bathwater when we do that. We have to be more surgical in the way that we deal with things that bother us or frustrate us, and not cast this massive net that just condemns everyone in a certain group. And like that, there's ego in that, and pride in that, and that is not the way a shepherd does things. And so I'm grateful. I'm grateful for President Nelson, since he's had that role placed on him, and the call to have peace and to bring people together. And like when I see people being so angry about certain things, it's hard. It's hard to, like, I'm Mr. Benefit of a Doubt person for a lot of people. And I know that everyone, no one's perfect in how they respond to things. And so I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but it can be very tricky when it gets to a certain level where it's like just tribalism. And so, it's summertime now, and I'm going to try to kind of back away from some of the dialogue going on, and just my only recommendation, even though I'm nobody, would be to keep being prayerful and keep being peacemakers and not be tribal. And when we are offended by something, to just, like, not everything requires a hammer. Okay? Like, don't let pride and ego get the best of you. Because it's going to be very hard when people see you lashing out. It makes them want to throw out the baby with the bathwater with whatever message you have. So be peaceful. Be kind. Be prayerful. Be humble. And if other people aren't being any of those things, you still can be. It'll make more of a impact in whatever message you have. Be like Ephraim and Manasseh. So, talk to you guys soon. Bye-bye.